We are interested in achieving a path that's more closer to something that Denmark or Norway has gone through.
That's one of the DSA's co-chairs claiming they're simply pushing Nordic-style socialism. But a survivor of Mao's policies wasn't buying those mental gymnastics, and quickly explained why these softer labels are nothing but attempts to downplay the danger they pose.
Yeah, I want to say that when you put whatever adjectives in front of communism or in front of socialism, it doesn't change its nature.
And today, we're breaking it all down. So let's jump right into it.
Grace, you just heard from Alina and Xi. They're both still with us on the show. How would you convince them that your style of socialism in America would be different than their experiences in Cuba and China that they see happening now and the echoes of the platform that they're very familiar with?
Well, I'm certainly not sure I can convince them in the next few minutes, and I really want to respect the experiences that they've gone through. But the difference to me is really our emphasis on democracy. If the majority of Americans are not interested in these policies, they will not be enacted. And the majority of Americans right now aren't yet. So we don't have anything close to socialism, and we don't have anything close to what we're talking about. But more and more Americans are interested in it, and the way that they're expressing that is in the ballot box. We are interested in achieving a path that's closer to something that Denmark or Norway has gone through, where they have had a political revolution through the ballot box rather than something like what China or Cuba has gone through.
Okay, if we want to model ourselves after Denmark or Norway, there's an important detail being left out. Those countries still operate capitalist market economies. Second, America isn't built on the idea that a simple majority gets whatever it wants. We're a constitutional republic, and the system deliberately puts barriers between a temporary majority and absolute political power. You can even win the national popular vote for president and still lose the election. And here's where the DSA agenda gets dangerous. They want a new constitution, no electoral college, no Senate, and an entirely different political system. Basically, they'd remove many of the safeguards specifically designed to prevent tyranny of the majority. Now that we have these facts out of the way, let's hear from Castro's daughter and a woman who actually lived through Mao's Cultural Revolution.
Alina, what is your response to what Grace has just said?
I will highly recommend to establish scholarships for your people to go to live in China for at least 3 to 6 months, and in Cuba to learn really what that system is able to give.
Yeah, I want to say that when you put whatever adjectives in front of communism or in front of socialism, it doesn't change its nature. It is still communism, it's still socialism. And you can say, oh, the people want free stuff. Let's just have free stuff. Remember, this country is built as a constitutional republic. Just because you and your friends want free stuff, and then we can just get free stuff, that's communism. And that never work out. Eventually, in communism, things will run out quick enough so everybody end with nothing. And I was there, lived through it. So young people like you, please read some history.
Oh, they read history. The weird part is they somehow come away from it even more sympathetic to communism. Hanson Piker is a pretty good example. Now, most people have heard about Mao's Cultural Revolution, where millions were either killed or persecuted for supposedly, quote, betraying the revolution. But roughly a decade earlier came the Great Leap Forward, which triggered one of the deadliest famines in human history. It was so bad that China's life expectancy collapsed into the low 30s as tens of millions starved to death. A major factor was the destruction of private farming, forcing peasants into communes while the state took control of grain production and distribution as harvests collapsed. And China wasn't some isolated case. Other communist regimes created similar disasters after launching themselves into power under the guise of socialism. Katie Pavlich then pressed the DSA co-chair on the movement's admiration for figures like Mao, and suddenly she didn't have much to say. But before we play that, we have a quick message from today's sponsor. Now, recently, we featured Vol Strategic Mining, trading as KNXFF in the US and KNOX in Canada, highlighting how the company was assembling what could become one of America's most strategic tungsten portfolios. Well, since then, the story has gained more momentum. See, Vault has strengthened its position by acquiring 4 historic tungsten assets, led by its flagship war bond project in Nevada. Now, the timing really couldn't be better here. The US still relies heavily on imported tungsten, with around 90% of global supply controlled by geopolitical rivals. Now remember, this goes beyond mining. You see, tungsten is a critical mineral used in everything from aircraft carriers and armored vehicles to precision-guided weapons. That's why Washington has made securing domestic critical minerals a national priority. With billions of dollars being directed towards domestic production, Vault is positioning itself where policy and growing demand really intersect. So, if you want to learn more about them, click the link in the description. Special thanks to Vault Strategic Mining for making today's video possible.
All right, I just want to ask a follow-up question, Grace, about something you said about Denmark getting structured like a European, quote, socialist country rather than a Chinese communist style or Cuba. You have all these conferences around the country, one of them being in Silicon Valley at the DSA conference. You have posters that show socialists that you guys look up to. One of them is Assata Shakur, who murdered a New Jersey state police officer and fled to Cuba. She did that in the 1970s. Then you have also Che Guevara, who was Argentinian, helped Fidel Castro establish his regime and oversaw executions. So why is it that the DSA is endorsing these kinds of quote socialists rather than, I don't see much about Denmark in the material you guys are handing out or in your platform?
I'm so sorry, I actually don't know what you're talking about because in our DSA office, we don't have any of those posters, so I'm not sure I'm able to respond to the question you're asking.
Yeah, she definitely knows. Playing unaware is just easier because there's really no good way to defend it. They even had a faction within their own ranks calling itself the Communist Caucus, and by some accounts, is becoming increasingly influential, especially when it comes to bringing new members into the organization. Then you have high-profile DSA members who reportedly expressed support for the Chinese Communist Party after taking a sponsored trip to China, including people who work for Mandami's campaign. The co-chair tried brushing aside these concerns with the usual progressive talking points, but that becomes a lot harder when that person sitting across from you actually lived through Mao's policies.
I would love to respond to that with some examples of this free stuff we're talking about. Public education, public schools are free to Americans. We want to extend that to younger children. Things like Social Security is a benefit that all Americans have paid into, and many people like that. Medicare and Medicaid. We believe that that program should be extended, not just to the elderly and the low income, but the middle class and working class as well. These programs are actually already part of American lives, and Americans really like them, and I think would support across the political spectrum, support the idea of them being expanded.
We poured so much money in public education, and it failed miserably. Look at what happened in Baltimore. We have so much money there, and not one student passed the examination. And it's not like we don't have enough money there. And for education, my question is, the money never solved the problem. So, and you want to expand that failure model to younger kids? No way.
Okay, if you think about it, Democrats have pushed versions of some of these policies for years. The big difference is they didn't attach the socialist label to themselves or flirt with communist ideas while doing it. That's what makes the DSA's current rise really so strange. And when you actually dig into their solutions, the answer always seems to be more government controls, taking over private industries, and raising taxes that eventually reach well beyond just the wealthy. So here's to hoping enough voters see through the pipe dream before the midterms. Because once you start tearing down the system that made this country so successful, putting everything back together isn't nearly as easy as the people promising a revolution would have you believe. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember, keep thinking.